now, good morrow to this fair assembly. Welcome to our English at Leeds Trinity podcast made by students and staff at Leeds Trinity University, where we discuss all different topics that interest us in relation to English. It could be language, could be literature, could be creative writing. I'm Richard Storer. I'm a lecturer in English at Leeds Trinity, and this episode is going to be all about Shakespeare. We're working our way through the alphabet, one episode for each letter of the alphabet, or at least one episode for each letter. And I didn't really want to wait until we get to S to do Shakespeare. We've now arrived at F, and one of my favourite topics in relation to Shakespeare starts with F, and that's the First Folio. So we're going to go with that. So this is going to be about Shakespeare, and particularly about the First Folio. And I'm very pleased that I'm joined by four people who I've had various conversations with about Shakespeare's First Folio before. Now, it happens that in Shakespeare's plays, there isn't really any examples of people saying hello. I think the closest you get is when Hamlet says something like hello. But it's not a regular greeting. So what I've asked everybody to say the equivalent of hello, but in a greeting that is found in Shakespeare's plays. And so first of all, I'm very pleased to welcome back Hannah.
Save you.
And also to welcome back Ben.
Grave, sir. Hail.
And to welcome for the first time Imi.
What cheer.
And then I'm also very pleased to be able to welcome my colleague, Dr. Basil Glynn, who is he teaches documentary and other things in our School of Digital and Screen Media, which is where English is as well. So, Basil.
All hail, great master.
Thank you. Right, that's the main bit of this out of the way now. I was just hoping for that one. So, thank you. Those are all genuine Shakespeare greetings. You can find them by searching the Shakespeare Concordance. Now, when I've studied the First Folio with Hannah and Ben and Imi before, and with other students, what we've usually started with before we actually start looking at the text a bit more is just interesting always to me to know what everybody's history with Shakespeare is before. What plays have you or texts have you kind of had most to do with, whether at school or through some other means? It's just useful for us to know what the main texts we are that we're thinking of as we just generally discuss Shakespeare. I'll just say mine first. When I was at school, we had a teacher who was very, very keen on Macbeth. Even when we were doing Macbeth with another teacher, he always still wanted to kind of talk about it. So that one looms quite large for me. And then we did a production of Twelfth Night, which I had a part in. So I had to say lines like, notable pirate, thou saltwater thief. If music be the food of love, play on. And then while I've been working at Leeds Trinity, just up until quite recently, I've always been involved in courses where Othello plays quite a large part. So that's the other play that I seem to have had a lot to do with. Who would like to go first?
I can start.
Yeah. Thanks, Hannah.
That's okay. I did Macbeth at school as well, as you said. I know it's been mentioned, but I think that's the only thing I did at school, Shakespeare-wise,
right,
which I'm surprised by. Most of the other Shakespeare readings have been my own spare time. So I also, when I was younger, I wrote synopsis of different plays to kind of understand what was going on. I quite like Othello, and I also like Venus and Adonis, which is a poem. It's very, very long, but I really like that.
Well, it's worth mentioning that, isn't it? Because one thing particularly that's interesting about that is it's not in Shakespeare's First Folio, even though it is thought that it was his most popular work during his lifetime. So there were a lot of other editions of it around, but for some reason they didn't include it or any of his poems in his collected works in the First Folio. So, right, thank you. Do you still do the synopsis thing?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. There are a lot of plays. So
I always think it's a really good method to actually just kind of write out what you think is happening. For a lot of things to summarise it.
I think it's complicated with Shakespeare. I think, especially when I was doing it when I was younger, I think it could be hard to kind of understand what's going on a little bit. So it does help to do that.
Yeah. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, I think most of my knowledge comes from probably being at school as a student and then also wanting to be a teacher. So it's kind of like I currently have to do still quite a lot in terms of Shakespeare. It catches people off guard a little bit when I say I did Merchant of Venice at school, because it's not one that's usually, people don't usually say they've done that one. It's either Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth. So I have a bit of knowledge of the Merchant of Venice. Yeah, it's a really good play, actually. I really enjoyed doing it at school. Not that I remember much of it, but I remember like characters' names, who they were, and things like that. Since then, probably mostly Macbeth. I mean, the odd tutoring that I do, I have read Macbeth and try to help with some of my students where I can. And then Romeo and Juliet, obviously I did that on placements at schools and things like that, so that's most of my knowledge. Oh, and Tempest a little bit, but that's just because it was his final play. So that kind of interests me a little bit to see where it went from his first plays to the final.
Yeah. It's often identified as perhaps his last one.
Yeah.
Particularly because it includes the scene of the magician Prospero kind of giving up his magic. So some people often relate that to the idea of Shakespeare kind of retiring. Though I don't know if we really did that or not.
And I mean, I doubt it, but I mean, it could be.
It could be. Yes, it makes a good sort of story. And how about you, Imi?
Well, at school I did both Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet. I think I preferred Romeo and Juliet because that's the one that I remember most, mainly because the teacher decided to switch the gender roles.
Oh, so, right.
Yeah, that would make for interesting watching. And then outside of school, it was Twelfth Night and Midsummer Night's Dream. Right.
Okay, yeah. It does seem like Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet, they seem to have a bigger share, I get the impression, in what people are studying these days than any of the others. Basil, how about you?
I mean, for me, weirdly, it's always been Julius Caesar, I think. I don't have much memory of Shakespeare at school, but I remember watching the film with Marlon Brando, Mankiewicz film, and it really helped get me into cinema, but also into Shakespeare, really, because it was a really unusual film. Because I've been into Brando with, On the Waterfront and Venus and Pater and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the idea of him being in Shakespeare with kind of classic sort of British actors like James Mason and John Gielgud and people like that. And in a sense, I thought at the time, I had to revisit it now, but I thought he kind of acted them off the screen, really. And I still remember the rabble-rousing speech about the funeral sort of oration for Julius Caesar.
So in that film, does Marlon Brando play Mark Antony?
He does, yeah. You've got someone who I can't even remember who played Caesar, but you've got John, from memory, you've got John Gielgud as Cassius and James Mason as Brutus. But what was so interesting about it was, up until then, I'd always thought of Brutus as this kind of, literal backstabber.
Yes.
But in the film, he comes across as this really kind of principled kind of person. It's a really interesting kind of political thriller almost in the way that it's filmed.
Right.
But it came full circle then with my daughter, because she was at school required to do a kind of a kid's version of a Shakespeare play. So I was talking to her about Julius Caesar, and she wrote something about Julius Sneezer, where where the Senate wants to assassinate him because they can't hear themselves think with all this sneezing that's going on. So it has recurred, come full circle.
That's a good creative response there, isn't it? So that's great. Right. Okay. Thank you. So we've got quite an interesting variety of different titles there. Now, I just want to refer back to our previous episodes. We did two for various reasons about the Eurovision Song Contest. One about 2023, and then one about 2024. And but in the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest, you may wonder where I'm going with this, but it is actually going to come to Shakespeare. There was a curious song in there, the entry for Austria, which was all about Edgar Allan Poe. And we talked a bit about that in our previous episode. But then it also contained the line, maybe someone out there knows where Shakespeare is. And that was a kind of curious line. It was a very unusually literary song. And it might be that the reference to Shakespeare was some kind of code, like the reference to Poe was. I might be on rather dangerous ground here, but assuming it was a kind of literal song, maybe someone out there knows where Shakespeare is. And we can sort of perform a public service here by just answering that question. He's buried in Stratford-on-Avon. That's where he is. He's not going anywhere. But I think what people really mean when they ask that is, where can I get to access Shakespeare? And one answer to that, I think, would be, or go to the theatre, or indeed, as you remind us, Basil, see a film. But another would be, it's in his texts, and one text that particularly, more than any other, kind of defines where Shakespeare is at, I think, or where we access Shakespeare, not least because one notable feature of this text is that it's got the famous portrait of Shakespeare, the one that gives us our image of Shakespeare, very prominently at the beginning. So that is the First Folio that was published in 1623, the first time Shakespeare's plays had been kind of brought together 7 years after his death in one big kind of luxury book. And so that is the most important book in Shakespeare studies, although it's not all sufficient. And it's also probably the one that's been studied to an extraordinary degree, examined, and much more attention given to it than almost any other English book you can think of. One thing that's often said about it is that it's very important because it brought together 36 plays by Shakespeare, which more or less defines our total number of Shakespeare plays. And 18 of those had never been published before. So if we hadn't got the First Folio, we wouldn't have a text of those plays. And also all the other plays that had been published before, they'd only been published in individual volumes in this smaller size of book known as the quarto. And so to get Shakespeare's, even those 18 plays as one complete works, you'd have had to kind of gather them all together, which would have been no easy task, and maybe no one would have done that. So it's from the First Folio that we really get that idea of Shakespeare's complete works, which of course is a model of publishing that's been used again and again since then. So I thought what we might do, first of all, is just see if we can guess, by thinking of as many different Shakespeare titles as we can, what were those 18 plays that we would actually not know at all if the First Folio hadn't been published. And I'll just start off by saying that the first one, because it's the first one in the folio, is The Tempest. But we'll just go round, see how far we can get, giving us different titles, and I'll try and keep track. And I'll also tell you, because I've got it here, trusting that, Basil, you haven't got it open. Oh, I should have said this. I didn't say this before. I was just confused because he said, "All hail, great master," and that just stopped me thinking of anything else. But we actually are very happy that Basil is joining us, because you're not actually here in the studio. You are somewhere else entirely, but you are joining us remotely. And that's a first for us in this podcast. Hopefully we'll be able to do it more often from now on. So that's great. But it means that you could, in theory, have your screen open with all Shakespeare's plays in front of you. But I'm going to see what everybody can remember of titles of Shakespeare's plays. So we'll start with The Tempest. And Hannah, what else have you got?
Hamlet.
So Hamlet. And that's actually one that was published before. So we would still know about that one. It went in through several editions. Ben?
Romeo and Juliet.
And so Romeo and Juliet also we would have known before. That was actually very popular. Imi?
Macbeth.
So Macbeth is one that we would not know at all. It is one of the ones that is only in the folio. So it has, from that shaky start, it has come to kind of dominate the Shakespeare sort of scene now. So Basil?
I'm going to go with Othello.
Othello, yeah. And that's one that was published before, but only 1 year before. So that one's like the last one that came out before the First Folio. And yet, strangely, the quarto and the folio are kind of different. So far we've identified two of these. Let's do another round.
All's Well That Ends Well.
Yes, that one. Not such a well-known play. That is one that is only in the folio.
Much Ado About Nothing.
Much Ado About Nothing. That one did come out before.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Midsummer Night's Dream. Oh, that one also was published before. So we've actually, most of the ones we've said are ones that were known before. We would have a chance of knowing them still, even if we didn't have the First Folio. Basil?
Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar, it appears as the life and death of Julius Caesar, and that one was only in the First Folio. Yeah, so we've identified 4 of the 18 from the First Folio, and we'll do one more round, and then I'll tell you what the others are.
Henry VI.
I'm going to give you that one because there are actually 3 parts of Henry VI.
Yeah.
I won't ask you to say which one is the one of them was only in the folio, and that's the first part. The second and third parts, apparently they kind of were more popular. The first part is only in the folio.
Merchant of Venice.
That one was published before, so that is in a quarto.
12th Night.
So 12th Night is one that we only know through the folio. Yeah, so and that's a very popular one, isn't it? As we've said, it's only known through the folio. Anybody want to throw in any more? Oh, Basil, sorry, forgot.
That's fine, great master. It's Antony and Cleopatra. I'm going to go for.
Yes, indeed, and that one was only in the folio. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those now.
Love Labour's Lost.
Love's Labour's Lost. I can't find it. Oh no, that one did actually. That's a very not very well known one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very not very. And yet that one actually was. There was a previous edition of that one published quite early on. So it must have had some popularity.
I mean, I don't know if this is like cheating a bit from the research that I did, but the tragedy of Titus Andronicus.
Yes, but that one was published before because it was popular, I think, because it was so gory. That's the reason why it's not very popular with us now. But yeah, that one was published before. Okay, well, that's fine. We've got a good lot. I'll just tell you what the others were that are only in the folio. So there's The Two Gentlemen of Verona, which...
Right.
You know that one?
I've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Not so many people have read that. Measure for Measure. That still gets done in school sometimes. Yeah. The Comedy of Errors.
Oh,
yeah. I've never read.
That's a kind of very complicated plot with that one, with 2 people who are like identical twins, 2 sets of identical twins, I think, who don't know each other. And yeah, I won't even try to explain. As You Like It. Mm-hmm. The Taming of the Shrew. The Winter's Tale. Life and Death of King John. Henry VIII. That's not such a well-known history one, is it? Coriolanus. That's another kind of one. Roman. This one's the one that would kind of win in a pointless thing, I think. Timon of Athens. You read that, Basil?
I haven't, no, because when I did my my MA, I loved the sort of classical, tragedies, and so I didn't know about that play. But it was just interesting to me at the time that Shakespeare never really engaged with Greek tragedies. He wrote so many tragedies, but he based them on sort of Roman historians rather than the actual kind of plays themselves, which was just interesting, really.
Yeah. So this is perhaps his little dipping his toe into it somehow. I don't know the plot of Timon of Athens. I'm just going by the Athens reference there. And then the last one we haven't mentioned is Cymbeline, King of Britain. But those are the ones that we wouldn't know. Like I say, it wouldn't be the same even if the other 18 would still have to be collected. So the First Folio really gives us a kind of very important basis for the way that we think about Shakespeare in lots of different ways. Now, this text has been in the news recently because 1623 it was first published. A huge book, a huge undertaking in terms of printing, especially if you look into how they went about printing it. And so last year, 2023, was the 400th anniversary of publication of the text. And so lots of things went on then. It's thought that about 750 copies of this big book were published. And of those, it's known that about 250 still survive, which is quite a high number, apparently, for a book from that period. And most of those are in museums and libraries around the world. The vast majority of them not in the UK anymore, but I think there are about 50 or so that are still in the UK. And so most people who had one did some kind of exhibition last year to try to kind of share it with the public and sort of make it accessible, and so people could find out a bit more about the First Folio and lots of other things as well. There was a 3-part TV series about Shakespeare's life and various other things. So We don't have a copy of the First Folio here at Leeds Trinity, but we are quite fortunate in Leeds in that there are 2 copies within a sort of 30-mile radius, and that's sort of quite unusual, I think, this far north. I'll say a bit about those in a minute because I went to see both those last year. But I think, Basil, you were saying to me that you did go to one of these exhibitions somewhere else where a copy of the actual First Folio was being displayed. And what was that? Where was that? And what was that like?
Well, it was one of these things that you do as a parent, which is to try to expose your children. So I've got 10-year-olds, there were 10 last year, to try to expose them to culture and Shakespeare and things like that. And it seemed like a great opportunity to do that. It was at Aston Hall in Birmingham, which is sort of like a kind of a Tudor stately home. And they were doing a lot of different events. So you could do kind of stage fighting in the fields and have a go at printing the way the First Folios are printed. But they were making a big deal out of the fact that it was apparently Birmingham University, wherever the folio is kept, I think it's Birmingham University, was the first major Shakespeare library in the world, according to them.
I see. Yeah.
And it was the only folio owned by the people of the city. You were saying, they tend to be owned by museums and things like that, so it's kind of publicly owned. But yeah, my kids looked at it for about 2 minutes and then went off to buy fridge magnets, and as kids do. When I was there looking at this folio, which is under glass.
Yes.
And it was just open, rather provocatively, I think, just at this page where there was a library stamp on it.
Oh, right.
And that was the major piece of conversation where people were thinking it'd been defaced, with this.
I see. Yes.
Library stamp. And the person that was there was basically saying, it's a really valuable part of the folio's history because it shows that it was this other thing, if you like, that people could just, look at before it was put under glass and you could only look at a couple of pages. So
yes,
that was really interesting to me anyway. And I got a nice fridge magnet from the day too.
That is an interesting feature of it, isn't it? Because it was an expensive book when it came out in 1623, but that is nothing compared to, it's sort of worth millions of pounds now, any copy, isn't it? And so it's become sort of so precious that no way could you put a stamp on it or write something in the margin. But at the same time, those copies that have got things like that have become kind of interesting to us because of those sort of interactions that people did before it was such a kind of priceless relic.
I agree. It gives you that sense of a journey, doesn't it? That it doesn't just appear here today. It's kind of travelled through history to us. And people have read it. People have done things with it.
Yeah. So my experience is somewhat similar. The glass is a kind of problem, I think, isn't it? It's got to be behind glass. They dare not let anybody touch it. But as long as it is behind glass, we can only look at one page of it, whatever page they've chosen for you. So I've been to the 2 places where nearby where it was at. One is the Craven Museum in Skipton, where they have a copy there. And that's, there it's really interesting, the existence of that copy. It's not that interesting to look at, perhaps, because it is sort of in a corner in a very secure place behind glass. There's lots of other interesting things in the museum, but you can't get a really good look at the folio. But it's just the interesting thing about that one is it's been in the possession of the kind of local council, I think, for a while. But they did not know that it was a First Folio until about 20 years ago when somebody came to inspect it. Until then, they thought it was a much less valuable copy of what's called the Second Folio that came out sort of 9 years later. And the reason they didn't know was because quite a lot of the book has disappeared. So all the front pages and all the comedies are missing. So it just starts in the middle of the play King John. So that also is quite an interesting thing, I think. Obviously, it's not great from the point of view if you'd rather have a whole one, but it is a very interesting thing to think, well, how did those comedies all go missing from that edition? What was it, the story there? Was it that somebody just didn't like comedy, or was it that somebody really liked comedy and therefore wanted those pages and didn't want the rest of it? I don't know. I think there's something interesting there. And that was before I didn't go and see their actual exhibition. I just went to see it in their normal display. And then there was a really good one down at the Brotherton Library at the University of Leeds, and where they have a copy of the First Folio. There they had combined that with a display of lots of other historic books from the period, a second folio, I think maybe a third and a fourth, some interesting quartos and things like that, which were all on open display, and you could look at them. But the first folio still had to be stuck behind the glass, and it was kind of away from the rest of it. So, in fact, the exhibition was brilliant. It was really great to talk about, and you could get really close up to all these books, but you couldn't really get very close to the first folio. So it's almost kind of withdrawn from access in that way. So it was a really good event, followed by a really interesting talk about it. But the impression I got really from that experience was that the first folio as an actual object has become so sacred that it ceases to be of any kind of, ceases to have any potential for us to really kind of engage with it as an object, because we can't get near it. Did any of you go to anything and see any of it either?
No.
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 Do you feel like you want to?
I'd definitely like to see it. Yeah. At the moment, my mind's just thinking, if it was like something that could be purchased, I wonder how many copies there are worldwide, not just people who came over, maybe picked it up and took it back. And I wonder if there's any others that we don't know about.
Well, that's a great question, isn't it? I think the last one that they do still from time to time find them. I mean, the last one that was found was, I think, found in a library in Scotland in 2016. And it's usually the case that what it is, it's a book that's been lying around and people didn't realise what it was. Because another thing about the first folio is when you bought it, you bought the pages, you then went and did your own binding, and then through the history of the book, you might do another binding or a different binding. Mm-hmm. So they don't all look the same on the outside. They all look different on the outside. And so it's quite possible that, I guess, I don't know, it would be amazing if you did find one, but you're not going to find one in your loft.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say that, just watching like a decade, and they'll just find one there's like some random house in France or something like that someone's just buried in the garden or something.
It'll be a great story if they did. They did find one in France a few years ago, but again, it was in a library. So I think the number perhaps will go up slightly, but of course, each one that's found is just going to go behind glass again. Yeah. And whoever finds it has got a massive security issue, unless they want to sell it. So that brings us really to the other aspect of it. If there's not really much future for us to kind of engage with the First Folio as a kind of immensely precious book, the future probably lies in digital copies of it. And that's certainly been my experience of working on it with you and with other students, that we can't get near it, but we can get near it through digital copies of it. So there's several kind of really good resources now. The one that's been around for a while is something called Internet Shakespeare Editions. That's a website that's free access to everybody, where you can look at digital images of 2 copies of the folio. And you can also look at, what's great about that site is you can look at all kinds of other texts as well, second folio, third folio, old spelling transcriptions and all kinds of things like that. But the really new thing that just came out last year, and I think really is a sort of game changer with this, is this new resource, which is again an open resource called First Folio Compared, which is where they have got digitized copies of about 50 copies of the First Folio, and you can fairly easily access them through this website. You can get really up close to them. There's lots of other interesting features, including you can compare the same page from 2 different copies. So that I found, that is where you can do much more interesting things. And you've all had a look at online First Folios as well. Basil, I think you were saying you've had a look at the one that you saw behind glass. The Birmingham one is in the First Folio Compared collection, I think. Have you had a look at that as well?
I did, yeah. I feel obliged to point out that I had, while you were talking, I had a quick look at the website for the Aston Hall exhibition, and it was aimed at raising awareness of Birmingham Shakespeare Memorial Library. So they clearly failed at that by me saying it was Birmingham University. So that's what it actually was, to raise awareness of. I did have a look at it, yeah, and it was interesting in the sense that I had a look at the kind of the title page. It's sort of about, there's a kind of a thing about in memory of the author and that kind of thing at the beginning. which I was just unaware of, just how much of a preamble there was to the actual book.
Yes.
Just that it was just open. And also looking at the title page, when you did that thing at the beginning, there were some plays there that I'd never heard of,
Yeah.
like The Life and Death of King John. I've never come across that. So yeah, it's nice to be able to see something that feels like a genuine photograph, I guess, of the actual thing, rather than a reprinted, reconstructed copy that looks somehow different.
Yes.
It feels like you're looking at the actual thing, albeit digitally.
That's
and
right.
and you can move around it yourself. You can pull it up and down and left and right, and it feels like you can almost get your digital fingerprints on it. Your hands on it in a way.
Yeah, well, you can go really close, can't you? So you can really examine, individual words. You can spot the little dots on the page and that kind of thing, which is great. And to me, also, you can see the mistakes, things like that. So you mentioned the title page, and in fact, there's one play that's missing from the title page, which is something to do with that they only got the rights to it quite late on. So they'd already printed the title page, 750 copies of the title page. They weren't going to print it again. But so they had to just kind of put that play in without it being in the title page. That's Troilus and Cressida. So that's all part of the kind of reality of the publishing behind it, I think, which is really interesting. I was going to ask Hannah and Ben and Imi also for any thoughts on the experience of looking at the First Folio online. You all did an assessment where you kind of had a good look at it and sort of put some images from it, and pointed out things. Is there anything you want to recall from doing that?
Yeah, I'll start. I was just going to mention briefly one way that I think this website that you discovered could be improved is by having access to the other folios and then doing a direct comparison between folios, say like First Folio and the Fourth Folio.
Oh,
That'd
yes.
Quite an interesting to get side by side, because I found that when doing the negotiated assessment, I had to jump a lot between finding one and then finding the same page in the Fourth Folio.
Yes. So the later folios, where they went to the trouble of printing the whole thing again, having set it all up in 1632, 1664, I think, and then 1685. It is very interesting to compare across them. I agree. So that's something you can do through Internet Shakespeare editions, actually, which is why that's still useful, even though this new one is very good.
I've got my negotiated assessment in front of me and the things that I did for that. And most of what I did just seems to be sort of spelling. And this was another thing I looked at earlier this week, was looking at some of the spelling differences between even like a line apart. So the one that I've got is from the tragedy of Titus Andronicus, and the nurse, and it says devil, which is DEU. Obviously, they use their U's and V's interchangeably. DEUILL, which is quite an odd way of saying it. And then the line directly below Aaron says devil, as in DEUIL.
Right.
So it's that in like a line apart. Change in spelling.
Yeah. I do agree with that, because when you study Shakespeare, when you study it at school, you get given a text, don't you? It will have been completely cleaned up in terms of the spelling. Yeah. And that's important, perhaps, for everybody to be able to work with it. But when you look at a First Folio digitally, you can really get this really strong sense of how different it was, and how much spelling has kind of gone through changes. Now, two different spellings are close together. It really was a period of much more instability in that. I'll go on to you, Hannah.
Yeah, so I actually really enjoyed the assignment, and I like looking at the original First Folios just because it's authentic, and I think I prefer reading Shakespeare this way. It's challenging, but I prefer it because it's like a look into history. And I've mentioned before, I love history. On my assignment, when I was looking at the spelling and pronunciation, Henry VI, I just found it quite interesting looking at the First Folio, the word then, when we're comparing better than, we usually say than now, and in the First Folio, and I was comparing it to the Fourth Folio, and obviously it did change to an A instead of an E. And a lot of words have an E on the end, which also kind of dissipated over time and things like that. Just little tiny details, I think. you have to get used to it, and your eye has to kind of get used to that as you read it, especially with the V's and the U's as well.
Yes, it's loads of things, and the S that looks
the long S
looks like an F.
Yeah.
And so seeing all those things, I think you're right. I think there is, now we've got this resource, there's great potential in reading the plays again, because you can find which edition you like the look of, which one is easier on the eye, and read it. It's certainly brought that, that experience closer, which, while all we've got is these books behind glass, there's no way of being able to do that. And now it's actually anybody can do it. Yes. So there's loads of interesting things about that. And I think also any page of the folio you look at, if you look close enough, you'll see some kind of mistake, or something that's like a little bit irregular. When you think about how they had to do this, each line had to be assembled with individual pieces of type back to front. So it's such a laborious process, all being done without Shakespeare there to sort of say, this is what I want it to be. He's sort of far removed from the process. Well, he was dead anyway, but even, could be 2 or 3 different people involved in the process, and the compositor, the person putting the type together, making the decisions. One thing that is particularly interesting, I think, and for this I am going to give a shout out to a former student, Lewis, who spotted this in his assessment, is where in Othello Act 1, there's a moment when Iago says, farewell, for I must leave you. It seems not meet nor wholesome to my place to be producted against the moor. Producted is a strange word in itself, isn't it? But that word place comes at the end of the line. It happens to come at the bottom of the page as well. And interestingly, in some copies of the First Folio, the word place, the letter P has been put in the wrong way up. So it actually is delace. And you can find that in 2 or 3 of the copies that are in the First Folio compared. But others, such as the Brandeis one, it's been corrected. So what we've got there is an example of what are called stop press corrections, where they started printing that page with it the wrong way up. And then at some point, somebody did spot that. There's loads of other errors that they didn't really spot. But someone obviously spotted that, said, stop, go back to the print, just turn that letter the right way up, and then carry on. And so then, there are lots of these corrections scattered through all the different folios. It's been kind of very well documented. But I think that's a really interesting one, which Lewis pointed out to me. I never would have found my way to it otherwise. It just is so great because it just kind of takes you right back to a moment which must have happened in the print shop. Somebody just said, oh, look, this page isn't right. Stop. I don't know whose fault it was, whether they got in trouble for it. Let's just stop and turn this round. So that's one little moment in the history of production of this text that must have happened, and there's an awful lot of things we don't know, but we can sort of almost feel that one happening. Anyway, I'm very enthusiastic about this First Folio compared. I think it's absolutely the best thing to come out of the 400th anniversary of the First Folio, and I hope to make lots more use of it. We've just got time for one more little thing to talk about, which is that whether you read Shakespeare or not, there are some people who definitely have been directly affected by the First Folio, and that is everybody who has the name Imogen. And that includes Imi, who's in with us now, we always call you Imi, but your name is Imogen. And the reason for that is that the name Imogen comes to us from the First Folio, from the play Cymbeline, King of Britain, which we only know from the First Folio, and that is the name of the main female character in that play. And so everyone who's got the name Imogen now has got it because of that. But it seems that, well, you've got the note there, Imogen, you've got a baby names book, I think, from the 40s.
Yeah, I think it's from the 40s. It's the Oxford Dictionary of English baby names. So it's, 1950, this one. So, and it talks about, like you said, how it comes from Shakespeare's Cymbeline. But it also says that it was found in Much Ado About Nothing as well, with the 2 N's instead of an M.
Right. So instead of being Imogen, it seems likely that really it was Inogen, INN.
Yeah.
And so the person who was putting the text of symboling together, couldn't tell the difference between an M and two N's, which if it's handwritten, you can understand because that's the same number of sort of downstrokes, isn't it? So all the evidence which is mentioned, it's interesting that it's mentioned in that book, which takes us back almost 100 years, that it's already known then. And it does seem now that all the scholarly opinion seems to be on the side of inogen. There's not really anything to say in defense of imogen as what Shakespeare must have intended. But that kind of leaves us with this dilemma, because I think imogen is such a much nicer name than inogen.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly.
And so we're sort of going to, scholarship may say one thing, but our culture in a way might want it to be different. I think the suggestion is that it's sort of related to a Celtic name, which is the INN thing, and so it's got more kind of history to it, whereas Imogen comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, this book does say it's Old Irish.
Right.
It comes from Ingen, so
Right.
INGEN.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah. How would you feel about it if your name was Inogen?
it would be unusual. But yeah, I mean, I go by Imi, so I can't really imagine going by Ini.
Ini, yeah. Yes. So I kind of hope that Imogen will sort of live on. We just got to say that Shakespeare may have had one thing in mind, but the compositor made a mistake. But that mistake was in a way the sort of mistake of genius, and so it's kind of added something. Right. Okay. Well, I think that's all we've got time for, and I haven't made a list of little good Shakespeare farewells. Shakespeare, we did so well with the hellos. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for this discussion about the First Folio and Shakespeare. Thank you, Basil, for joining us online.
Thanks, Richard.
You're still there? Yes, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And yes, fairly well. I think that's a fairly safe one.
You stole that. I was going to say that.
Okay.
Yeah, fairly well.
We'll go with that one. Thank you. Well, I don't know why I said there were 250 copies of the First Folio known to be in existence. I got a bit carried away there. The actual number of folios in existence that have been catalogued is around 230. If you want to see an actual copy of the First Folio, a good place to go is the Craven Museum in Skipton, North Yorkshire. It's free entry, the First Folio is always on display, and Skipton is a very nice place to visit. If you would like to read more about the First Folio, you can't go wrong with either of these books. The Making of Shakespeare's First Folio by Emma Smith and The Cambridge Companion to Shakespeare's First Folio, edited by Emma Smith. We mentioned a number of online resources in this episode that we've been using. These are free for anyone to access, and so I'll just recap the details. I mentioned a Shakespeare concordance. I was thinking of the one that is at the website www.opensourceshakespeare.org, but you can find that just by searching Shakespeare Concordance. That's a really useful resource for searching any words in Shakespeare, and that was created by George Mason University in Virginia, USA. We also talked about Internet Shakespeare editions. You can find that at internetshakespeare.uvic.ca, or just search Internet Shakespeare Editions. That's a resource that's created by the University of Victoria in Canada. It's really useful because it makes so many different kinds of texts of Shakespeare available. Not just First Folio digital images, but also Second Folio, Third Folio, Fourth Folio, quartos, later editions, old spelling transcriptions, and things like that. So that's very useful still. But the new resource that has come on the scene as a result of the 400th anniversary of the First Folio is First Folios Compared. And you can find that at firstfolios.com or just search for First Folios Compared. It's been created by the digital primary source publishing company AM, but it is open access so anyone can use it. You don't have to be interested in comparing two folios. That's just one of the things you can do. What's really great about it is that it brings together about 50 different digital copies of the First Folio that were previously hidden all over the internet. And it has such a good system for navigating the First Folio copies. So you can navigate by play title, by act, or even scene. And you can also navigate by the signature that was used by the printers to identify each individual page and get them in the right order. It's a much better and easier navigation system than any I've come across when I've tried to access First Folio copies online before. I could go on for another half hour talking about how great I think First Folio's compared is, but I will have to leave you to find out for yourself because Ben is waiting to do our outro message.
Thank you, Richard. You can find out more about Leeds Trinity from the Leeds Trinity University website at www.leeds.ac.uk and also from our at Leeds Trinity channel on YouTube and our formerly Twitter account at LTU English. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Steve Oxon and FestLeanStudios.com for this music, which is called Rio After Dark. And thank you to Free Music 109 for the Stingers, which is Renaissance by Audionautics Creative Commons.